He wasn't calling for help, he was calling for me. I was halfway through my midnight shift at the hospice center when the call came in. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something instinct maybe made me pick up. Is this Miss Hartwell? The voice was cautious, almost apologetic. Yes, who's calling? This is Nurse Angela from Clayton County Hospital. I'm calling about your father. My stomach turned cold. I don't. He was admitted 2 hours ago, stroke. He's stable for now, but he's not responsive. He's been repeating one name. Yours. I said nothing. My fingers clenched the edge of the nurse's desk. There's no one else listed on his emergency contact form. She continued gently. Only you. First and last name. Handwritten. I hadn't spoken to my father in 15 years. Not since the night he stood on the porch of our house in Willow Creek, Georgia, and told me I wasn't his daughter, that I should leave, that I shouldn't come back. And I didn't. Until now, I drove through the empty back roads of South Georgia in silence. No radio, no music, just the hum of old tires and the whisper of pine trees lining the 2-lane highway. Willow Creek looked the same and yet smaller. The white courthouse dome still gleamed under the streetlights. The bakery on Main Street still had the same flickering neon open sign. The old Baptist church still stood tall and solemn like a judge who never forgot. And me, I was the ghost returning to a town that had buried me alive. The hospital sat off a quiet stretch of Route 9 next to the Dollar General and across from what used to be Miller and Boyd construction. Now it was just an overgrown lot fence, rusting silence, thick. Nurse Angela met me at the ICU doors. He's in room 207. He's mostly unconscious, but he knew you were coming. I didn't say I was, I replied. She hesitated, then handed me a small clear bag of his personal effects. A cracked wallet, a pen. One photo, I recognized it instantly. Me age. 11, sitting on his shoulders laughing at the Willow Creek Harvest Festival. Behind us, the old church banner that read Psalm 55:22. Cast your burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain you. There was a small red circle drawn around the verse, hand-pinned, faint, deliberate. I stared at it. When I stepped into room 207, I didn't know what I expected. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. Older, of course, but not in the way that time ages you, in the way that guilt does. His eyes were closed, but as I approached, they fluttered open, just slightly. And then he saw me. His lips didn't move, his hand didn't twitch, but his eyes. They filled, not with tears, not even with apology, with urgency, like someone who knows they're dying and hasn't finished what they came to do, like someone who still held a secret between clenched teeth. I didn't speak, I just sat and waited, because if he had sent for me after everything, it wasn't out of regret. It was a summons. He once told me I didn't belong. But now, in the place where voices fade and truths remain, he'd called me back, and I knew he wasn't done. Not with me, not with what he buried. I wasn't abandoned. I was discarded. There's a difference between being left behind and being erased. When someone leaves you, there's usually a trace, a note, a slammed door, the echo of footsteps that once meant something. But when my father erased me, it was like I'd never existed at all. I was 17, the summer before senior year. I still remember the sound of the screen door slapping behind me as I stood on the porch, suitcase in one hand, scholarship papers in the other. He didn't yell, he didn't cry. He just stood there, arms crossed, jaw locked, and said, "You're not my daughter, and I need you to leave this house." Now I laughed at first. Thought he was joking. Then I saw the way he looked at me like I was a stain he couldn't scrub out. That night, I slept in my car behind the First Baptist Church, parked between 2 trash bins and a youth group bus with a flat tire. By morning, I was gone, but even before that night, there were signs. I was maybe 10 when the first man in a suit came by the house. He wore cologne, too strong for Willow Creek, and carried a briefcase, too nice for county business. He didn't stay long, just enough time for a whisper argument in the kitchen and the sound of paper being torn. I asked my mom who he was. She said, "A man your daddy should have never worked for." A week later, she was gone. Went to stay with her sister in Alabama. Dad said, no forwarding address, no goodbye. Just her scent left on the flannel robe behind the door. After she left, everything tightened. He started locking his study door, stopped attending church, started burning things in the fireplace, not logs but files. One night, I saw him clutching a ledger and whispering, Psalm 55 over and over like it was the only thing keeping him upright. I didn't understand. Then I was just a kid who liked drawing and sneaking moon pies out of the pantry. But now, sitting beside his hospital bed 15 years later, I couldn't unsee it. He didn't throw me out because I failed him. He threw me out because I saw too much, because I asked the wrong questions, because someone needed me gone, and now I was back. But this time I wasn't the girl with a suitcase and a scholarship. I was a woman with eyes wide open. And he, the man who erased me, had called me to bear witness to whatever he couldn't say out loud. They thought I would disappear when they cut me out, but I didn't vanish. I became quieter, sharper, and I carried the one thing they forgot to destroy, the truth. I left the town, but I never left the truth. I never told anyone what happened in Willow Creek. Not the woman who hired me to clean motel rooms off I-16. Not the night manager at the Waffle House where I pulled doubles for tips. Not even the hospice supervisor who handed me my first uniform and said, "You've got calm hands. Patients will like you." I didn't tell them that my father had thrown me out. I didn't explain why I had no family listed on my emergency forms. I just kept my head down, showed up early, stayed late, and learned how to listen without flinching when people died. There's something about hospice care that teaches you how to disappear. The silence, the waiting, the final goodbyes that come without fanfare. It suited me. No one asked questions. No one needed to know my name meant anything back in Willow Creek. But still, there was one thing I kept. Tucked between the pages of a battered notebook I carried from job to job, the photo I must have looked at it 100 times over the years. Me, 11 years old, sitting on my father's shoulders, the golden leaves of October swirling behind us. The Willow Creek Harvest Festival. You could see the booths in the background, lemonade stands, handmade quilts, the church bake sale table my mom used to run. I was smiling like the world was whole, and he was smiling back. For a long time, I used that picture to convince myself I hadn't imagined the good parts. That there was once a version of him who loved me before the silence, before the exile. But then one day, I noticed something. On the back of the photo, beneath the smudged date and faded ink, someone had written a verse, Psalm 55:22. The same one I found circled in red in his wallet the night I arrived at the hospital. Cast your burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain you. I didn't know whether it was a prayer or a confession, but I knew one thing. It wasn't written for him. It was meant for me. In all those years, I didn't try to contact him. I didn't return to Willow Creek for holidays or funerals or old neighbors' birthdays. I let the town forget me, let them rewrite the family name without me in it. But I didn't stop living. I paid my rent, took care of my patients, held the hands of strangers while they took their last breaths. I sent half my paycheck to an old friend's daughter when she got pregnant at 19. I kept a drawer of letters. I never sent some addressed to Dad, most addressed to no one. I didn't need revenge. I didn't want pity. I just wanted a life that was mine, built from silence, stitched with small kindnesses, and solid enough that no one could take it from me again. And now, after 15 years of quiet, I was back in Willow Creek, not because I missed it, but because the man who erased me had left me a message, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to decide who I really was. They buried me to protect their name. Now they want me to stay gone. The ICU waiting room smelled like reheated coffee and worn-out upholstery. A Reader's Digest from 3 years ago sat curled open on the end table. Its cover faded from time and idle hands. On the wall hung a bulletin board full of smiling faces. Local church drives, bake sales, a harvest festival flyer stapled over a prayer circle announcement. Willow Creek hadn't changed. It just aged in place. I stepped inside and the air tightened like a door had slammed behind me. He was already there. William Hartwell, my uncle. My father's older brother and the self-declared gatekeeper of the family name. I hadn't seen him since I was 16 the day he told me, "Your father's not the kind of man who forgives mistakes. Best not make a second one by staying." He stood now by the vending machine, arms folded across his crisp blue dealership shirt, the kind with his name stitched in red thread over the chest. His mouth flattened the second he saw me. "Well, look who wandered back." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It carried the weight of someone used to being listened to. "We didn't think you'd show." "You weren't invited." "I was called," I said simply. He scoffed. Don't flatter yourself. He was confused. Stroke messes with the brain. He probably thought you were someone else. I said nothing. A voice behind me cut in. Softer. Slower. She's not someone else. Will I turned Uncle Thomas? He looked older than I remembered, gray streaking his temples, eyes a little more tired, collar of his preacher's shirt slightly wilted, but his gaze held mine with something close to recognition. Maybe even regret. She's the only name he wrote down, Thomas said, quiet but firm. It's her signature the hospital's waiting on. Not yours. William's jaw flexed. He took a step closer. You don't belong here, he said. You left. You broke your father's heart. You didn't even come back when your mother passed. She was already gone, I replied. Long before she left this world, and you know that. He shook his head like swatting a fly. You show up now thinking you have a right to what? Closure, forgiveness. You're 15 years too late. I didn't speak. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the photo. I handed it to him face up. He didn't take it at first. Just stared me on my father's shoulders, both of us smiling beneath the harvest banner, the same photo I found in Dad's wallet, the same one I had carried through every motel, every shift, every quiet year I wasn't supposed to exist. I flipped it over, let him see the red circle around the scripture, the faint writing, Psalm 55. He kept this, I said. 15 years, folded, protected. When everything else was gone, this is what he had in his wallet. William's face froze. His hand dropped. I turned to Thomas. What does Psalm 55 mean to you? Thomas swallowed hard. His voice caught just slightly. It means some burdens are too heavy to carry alone. I looked at both of them. William wouldn't meet my eyes. Thomas did, but his were full of something he wasn't ready to say yet. I put the photo back in my coat. If I don't belong here, then explain that. No one did. I walked past them down the hallway toward room 207. They didn't stop me, because deep down they knew. They hadn't just erased me to protect my father. They erased me to protect themselves. The truth wasn't hidden. It was sealed under the pulpit. The church was exactly as I remembered. White clapboard walls, stained glass windows faded by decades of sun, and a steeple that seemed too tall for such a small town. First Baptist Willow Creek had stood at the center of this place longer than most of the families who lived here, including mine. Thomas met me at the back entrance just after sunrise. He didn't ask why I was there. He just opened the door and stepped aside. Inside, it smelled like lemon oil and old hymnals. I hadn't set foot in this building since I was a girl, since the day I helped my father hang that same harvest banner in the fellowship hall. The memory stung not with pain, but with clarity. He hadn't always been cold. Something changed him, or someone. Thomas walked ahead of me past the sanctuary toward the narrow door that led to the basement. He held it open and we descended in silence. The concrete steps creaked beneath our feet. At the bottom, beneath rows of unused folding chairs and dust-covered Sunday school props, stood an old bookshelf. He reached toward the back, pulled out a cracked leather Bible, King James Version heavy with age and reverence. He placed it on the folding table between us and flipped slowly, almost unwillingly, to the bookmarked page, Psalm 55. Tucked beneath the page was an envelope, yellowed, sealed with wax that had long since crumbled. My name was written across the front in my father's handwriting, the same way it appeared on hospital records. Sharp pressed too hard into the page. I looked up at Thomas. I was supposed to give it to you when the time came, he said softly. But I waited. Why he didn't answer? Not with words. His shoulders fell, his gaze dropped, and I understood. Because silence was safer, because the town needed him to be the preacher, not the brother who knew too much. I opened the envelope. Inside was a letter handwritten uneven. Not a confession, not quite, more like a trail of pieces he hoped I would follow. He wrote about Miller and Boyd Construction, the company that used to sponsor the town's summer picnic and renovate the courthouse for free. He had been their accountant, trusted quiet, the perfect man to sign off on financials that didn't add up. But then the ledgers started whispering. Money missing. Grants shifted. Political donations disguised as building contracts. He said he tried to report it once anonymously, but they found out and they threatened him, not with violence, with exposure, with ruin, and with me. He wrote. They said if I didn't make you disappear from the picture, they'd make it permanent. I felt the air leave my lungs. Carla, his former secretary, had altered records, erased my name from accounts William had arranged. The silence told the town I'd left on my own, rebellious and unstable. Thomas had kept the letter too afraid of what might happen if the truth got out. He wrote, "I failed you to protect you, but the cost, I paid it every day, every Sunday, every time I looked in the mirror and saw a father who traded his child for his name. At the bottom of the page, barely legible. If she comes, give her the Bible. Let her choose what to do with the truth. I no longer can." I stood there for a long moment, the paper trembling in my hands. He hadn't asked for forgiveness, he hadn't even apologized, but he had left me the one thing he never gave anyone else. The last word I didn't need to be claimed. I needed to be remembered. The hospital was quiet when I returned that evening, the kind of quiet that sinks into your skin. Not peaceful, just still. The fluorescent lights hummed low and the hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt coffee. I stepped into room 207 one last time. He was still there, breathing slow and shallow, body thinner than it had any right to be. His eyes were closed. Whether he was unconscious or just unwilling to face me again, I didn't know. I didn't ask. I placed the Bible on the table next to his bed, opened to Psalm 55, the letter still tucked neatly inside. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the photo, the same one he had carried for 15 years, the same one William couldn't explain. I flipped it over and wrote something new on the back. Not for him, not really. Just 3 words. I remember everything. I left it beside his hand. Not for reconciliation, not for guilt, for recognition. So that when the nurse came in to check his vitals, or when Carla wandered in pretending she still had a place here, or when William returned to assert control, they would all see it, and they would all know that the girl they erased was never gone. She had just been watching, waiting, and now she had come back. Not for a seat at the table, but to burn the guest list. I didn't say goodbye. He didn't deserve it. Outside, the air had that Georgia weight to it, thick with the smell of pine pavement and the coming rain. I walked past the chapel, past the coffee machine that never worked, past the bulletin board where someone had pinned a flyer for this year's Harvest Festival. It hadn't changed in all these years. Same pumpkin font, same sponsors. Miller and Boyd wasn't on it this time. I allowed myself a small smile. In the parking lot, I opened my car door just as a sedan pulled up behind me. Neutral gray. No plates I recognized. The window rolled down. A young man stepped out mid-30s, crisp suit, legal pad in hand. "Ms. Hartwell," he asked. I turned slowly. Depends on who's asking. "I'm with Pine and Miller. Legal group, I represent a trust connected to the Willow Creek Community Development Foundation. There's been a motion to transfer ownership of a parcel of land. Your name appears on the original purchase file. We need your signature or your contest." I raised an eyebrow. "Someone's contesting it." I asked. "Yes, a family member. Claims you were added without consent." Of course they were. I took the pen he offered, signed where he pointed, and as I handed the clipboard back, I said, "Tell them I didn't come back for the land. I came back to make sure no one lies about who I was ever again." He nodded. Got back in the car. I watched the taillights fade into the dark. Then I climbed into my own car. No tears, no music, just my breath steady and full. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't carrying the weight of being forgotten. They would remember me now, not because I screamed, not because I begged, but because I left behind the one thing they couldn't destroy. The truth. Did this story echo something you've lived through or something you've witnessed in silence? Tell us in the comments. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear. If this story moved you, like and share to keep the truth alive for those who were forgotten and those who fought to exist again.